How you going? I love spearfishing, and I've spent heaps on countless bits of gear. But despite my passion, I'm kinda crap. And my ratio of shots taken to fish hit is at best like 1 out of 3. And even when I do hit a fish, like this cobia, which I shot from the back of an eagle ray, I lose them probably half the time. And that's a bad ratio. So today, instead of improving my aiming skills, I'm going to make a double-barreled speargun that hopefully makes it impossible for me to miss, which will lead me into the gnarliest 3-day adventure of my life. Where I face big ocean currents.
Pretty crazy current. Yeah. We're not moving.
Find some big fish.
That's a monster!
And even bigger sharks.
Big shot.
Yeah, I just saw it. It was heading right at you. Did you see what it was? I couldn't tell from above.
It looked like a wave.
Alright, the first thing I did was buy a big piece of wood. And there's debates amongst men in the spearfishing community about their favourite wood to get wet. And most men suggest teak or mahogany as they are high in oils and the wood doesn't expand underwater. But they are both too expensive. So I ignored all the men on the internet and went for this stuff, black butt, purely because I like the name. But I have no idea if it will be strong enough or go well underwater. And for the handle of the gun, I'm going to copy the design of my camera gun, as I like the feel in my hand, and I think it'll be hilarious to confuse beachgoers by looking like I'm bringing a shotgun in the water to shoot fish. So after I sketched out the handle, I started cutting the wood with the jigsaw. But I've already got a problem. Either I don't know how to use a jigsaw, or this wood is too tough. And I cut a random piece of wood to make sure, and it's definitely the wood, and this sucks. My whole body is vibrating, and worst of all, I already have my first crack. So to stop any more cracks from getting any ideas, I cut that one off and chucked it over the fence to disincentivize any others from appearing. So to avoid any more cracks, I decided to use my belt sander to just carve out the whole thing, which is incredibly wasteful as I'm just turning the wood into dust and won't have any usable offcuts. But at least I'm probably going to inhale half of the wood, so it's not all going to waste. And I finished doing the profile, but discovered something else very embarrassing. And I'm going to show you since I know you won't tell any of my other subscribers. Another crack. And I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong, as I've never worked on wood that has cracked this much before. It could be from all the times I dropped the wood on the hard concrete floor. Or it could be that time I used it as a piñata stick at a kid's birthday.
Rocks! You get rocks!
But I think more likely the wood is the problem. But besides the cracks, I'm very happy with the shape of the gun. So I drew a line down the middle, which is where the barrels will go. And they're going to be made out of these carbon fiber tubes. But there's a problem. The spear doesn't fit into the tube. So I need to cut a dead straight notch down the whole tube. And to do that, I made this guide so I can pass the tube in front of this Dremel tool. And while cutting carbon fiber, it's extremely important to ignore the manufacturer's recommendation of eating and inhaling the dust, as I've done that a couple of times and I find it really makes your asshole itch in the morning. Alright, in an attempt to hide the cracks I just created, I traced around this section where the trigger is going to go, as I want to reinforce it with a steel outer plate, but more importantly, it's going to look cool. And after cutting out the metal, I decided I didn't want to use this metal anymore, as it's shiny, and instead of cutting out a different kind of metal, I'm just going to stain it with the only gun-related thing I was legally allowed to bring back from the States: cold blue. I'm also hoping it'll add a bit of protection from the rust. But after looking up if it does that, it actually does the opposite. But I've already done it, so we'll find out what happens. Okay, now comes the most stressful part, which is cutting the slot for the trigger mechanisms. And I'm pretty scared because my first attempts at making it the trigger hole on scrap wood didn't go that well. And because it's double barreled with 2 spears, I'll have 2 triggers, which both have to be perfectly in line with each other in order to shoot straight. But I've got another problem. The 2 identical triggers I ordered aren't the same. But I guess just like identical twins, parts of their bodies can be different lengths. And I don't know what else to do besides cutting off the trigger and then re-welding it. And the welding industry wants you to think that you can't weld stainless steel with MIG, or that you need to buy special welding wire, but they're lying to you. And this seemed to come out fine, at least for now, until it rusts in the water. And somehow I got it pretty perfect. Okay, now for the trigger slot. And I did that using a router, a tool I've always been way too scared to use, ever since my mate Rowan cut the tip of his finger off. But my fingers are shorter than Rowan's, so I should just miss the end of the cutting bit. And I don't know the correct method, but I just plunged it into the hole and then gently moved it around, trying not to go out of my lines. Then I drilled some holes all the way through and tidied up the trigger slot, and put in the trigger mech. Alright, I've stuffed up again. If the spears are lying flat on the wood, they slide nicely into the triggers. But when I put the spears in the carbon fiber barrels, they don't fit.
Fiber. This is too high.
So either I'm going to have to raise the triggers up or cut rails for the carbon fiber tubes in the wood, which I'm just going to pretend I wanted to do the whole time, as it will also give me more surface area for the glue that I'm going to use later. So I cut some grooves with the router, and now I think this is going to work.
Fucking hell.
Next I cut some holes for the rubbers, and I want to use twin 16mm rubbers. And for the Americans, it's about the same thickness as your average Midwestern cock. Which will mean each spear has the power of a single 16mm rubber, which in my experience is more than enough. But I don't really know how thick the wood needs to be to support that much power, so that's another thing that could break. And this gun looks pretty nice, besides my dirty fingerprints all over it. So I sanded it all down, and also removed some more wood to hide the cracks that I had created, and then gave it a clear coat of epoxy, which will hopefully stop the water from getting in and making those cracks bigger, and also make it look prettier. And I picked this epoxy spray specifically because it was the only thing I had in this crack behind the shelf in my garage. And that looks alright. Okay, after letting the epoxy dry nice and hard, I then scraped the epoxy back off, so that the glue I'm going to use will stick strongly to the wood. And some of you are probably thinking that I could have just put masking tape over these areas while spraying the epoxy so I don't have to do double the amount of work. And you'd be right. And for the glue for the barrels, I sampled a lot of different kinds.
Okay, number one, you ready? Yep. Open your mouth. Up there.
That is horrible. Horrible.
Right, number two. Number two. Yeah, go.
Oh, they're actually pretty good.
Oh, you want to spit it out?
Yeah, I like that one.
That's the one?
I like that one. I
That's
like that
one.
one.
And by far my favorite was this one, 69 epoxy, which despite the name, I really wouldn't recommend using for that position. So I glued the carbon fiber barrels down, and I'm very glad I picked this epoxy, as it has an hour working time and 24 hours drying time, as it probably took me over an hour to get everything down and straight and in line with each other. And then I just waited for it to dry.
Please dry properly and in place. I'm not getting that off.
Next, I'm going to do something I've never seen on spear guns and put things on the front which I'm trademarking and calling shark pokers, as we quite often see sharks while spearing, and sometimes you have a nice sharp spear to poke them away with, but most of the time I find the sharks come in after you have shot the fish, and then you no longer have a spear. So this still gives me a way to poke them and always remain protected while in the water. And speaking of protection, let me tell you an even better way to protect yourself than shark pokers. Opera Browser, which is fully featured for privacy, security, and protects everything you do online. And it's also faster and smarter than any of the other browsers I've used, and was really helpful while making this video. I absolutely love the features it has, like Aria, an inbuilt browser AI, which is easily accessible in the sidebar and gives you clear answers instantly for whatever you want to know. Also, the highlight tool allows me to highlight anything online, and then Aria gives me a brief explanation and overview of the topic. Also, when you download Opera, you get your own island.
Wow.
Tab islands, which sorts my tabs by relation, so you don't have to have 30 tabs open at once, which makes my browser cleaner and easier to use. I also regularly use the free VPN and ad blocker, which is built into the browser so you can browse securely, so you can block ads whenever you want, which is incredibly useful. I also love this video pop-out feature, which means you can detach videos and keep watching them while browsing and doing other stuff, which allows me to do more things at once and is great for my ADHD. So go download Opera using the link in my description to get the most useful, safest, and fastest browser. Alright, back to the shark pokers. And the pokers also act as a wraparound point for the line that is connected to the spear. And that's something I haven't explained to you yet, the line release. I need a line attached to the spear, otherwise the fish just run away with the spear when you shoot them. And most spear guns have a little hook on the side that the line wraps around, which will release when you shoot. However, I don't want to put one of these on each side of the gun, as it seems annoying and a tangle risk, and also the triggers I bought didn't come with them. So my next idea was to use some of these money clips that I have because I'm a rich YouTuber, which I would attach to the side, and then the line would clip into them like this, and when you shoot, it just releases. However, I reckon I've discovered a better way, and I'm really confused why no one in the spearfishing industry does this. I can just place one end of the line around this, and then loop it over the fin of the spear, which will release when I shoot. And this is so simple and removes so many moving parts. But the spear could also just tangle and bounce back and hit me. Okay, then I attach the rubbers. And if you watched my last video, you'll know that I'm not the best at tying spear gun rubbers. So this time, I'm going to tie exactly the same knot. And just before giving this a test shot, I thought of something. When I pull the rubbers back and place it over the spears, they are most likely going to be forced together like this, and they might jam in the trigger mech. So to hopefully stop that, I just took out some rubber washers from my car engine.
I don't think this does anything.
And then placed that in it, which should keep the spears from pressing together. Alright, it's time for the first test shot, and technically, it's not legal for me to shoot this while I'm not in the water, but I think I found a loophole. And after retying all the rubbers, I had another go.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Wow.
Wow.
I'm glad I put the rubbers on the end. That
Yeah.
would have been nasty.
Like that could have like gone into the garage.
And I'm very happy with that shot. Both the spears came out at exactly the same time, and the lines also didn't tangle, and the power seemed like heaps. And that was only with one rubber. But the spears will be moving a lot slower in the water. Also, the cracks could get bigger. The triggers might not go off at the same time, and then the spears will unlodge in a catastrophic way. Oh, and the wood might be too heavy or too buoyant underwater. All of which I'll only find out once I get in the water.
To the town of Agua Fria rode a stranger one fine day. Hardly spoke to folks around him, didn't have too much to say. He's an outlaw, loose and running, came a whisper from each lip, and he's here to do some business with a big iron on his hip, a big iron on his hip.
Now, I want my spearing spots to remain secret so you guys don't just come there and mass kill every single fish, which is why I'm going to try and not show any recognizable locations. And after meeting up with my other mate, we headed out to get some fish. And obviously, as this is a video about me making a spear gun, I am going to be shooting fish. But don't worry, all the fish I shot were pedophiles. And we're at a pretty remote island chain 6 hours south of Sydney. And we've been here before and know that the area can be pretty rough. And with big swells forecasted, we decided to stick in the shallows, which would give me the opportunity to test out the gun and get my aim in on some smaller fish.
I'll see you at the water.
And I'm not sure what this turtle was doing. At first I thought it was just dead, as it wasn't moving and its head was squished under the rock, but I think it was just sleeping or trying to get a feed or something. So after waking it up, I got on the hunt for some fish. And here I'm doing a shallow dive to around 3 meters, 10 feet, as I saw a school of luderick in the distance. And luderick are usually pretty easy to hunt, but sometimes they can get skittish, and that's probably what happened as they saw me dive down, and then I couldn't get close enough to get a shot off. So I went out a little deeper and dove to around 7 meters or 22 feet and found a big group of red morwongs. And red morwongs are just one of those fish you almost feel bad for shooting, as they are a super easy shot and they just sit there staring at you with their big eyes. And in the background, I spotted one that looked around 40 centimeters, the perfect eating size. But I still missed. And then I found out the first problem with this gun. There's twice as many spears to tangle on stuff. And another problem I'm feeling is that the gun is super heavy in the water and it sinks really fast, which is making it really awkward to move around. So I reset the spears, which probably takes 4 times longer than a normal gun, and took another dive. And on the way down, found a hole that I thought an octopus would be in. But no one was home. But I did find this big school of blackfish, which are delicious. And I missed again. And for some reason, us Australians always have the most racist names for fish. We got blackfish, jewfish, Chinaman leather jacket. And if you think those fish have racist names, you should look up what luderick used to be called. And this gun is really hard to aim in the water. I can't turn it at all. And at this point, after missing so many times, I was desperate to get something for dinner, and even decided I was happy with something small. So I dove again with the plan of shooting a sawtail. And I'm making these grunting noises in a poor attempt to attract fish closer, as hopefully they'll think I'm drowning and come over to save me. And I missed again. Now looking back at the footage, I wasn't even pointing at the fish, so I'm definitely having trouble lining up the gun. Alright, so I had scared a lot of fish in this spot, so we moved into different water and did some deeper, longer dives at around 12 meters or 40 feet. Now for this dive, I want you to hold your breath with me and see how far you make it. Okay? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold. And breathe. And if you managed to hold your breath for that long, good work. And if you didn't, and you've now blacked out in front of your computer, Even better, please remain that way for the rest of the video and then let my other videos keep auto-playing after. And on this dive, I'm attempting to go full stealth mode and made my body as flat as possible on the bottom, and then used boulders as cover and then used my hands to crawl along trying to get closer to the school of lettering. So I missed again. And again. And there are a lot of problems with this gun. The biggest one being how hard it is to move around underwater, and I need to press it up against my shoulder to move it properly, which makes it incredibly hard to aim. And after missing this much, the weather turned to shit, so we called it a day.
I mean, day one I learnt gun misses a lot.
And day 2, we woke up early and the swell was looking super flat, and even before we got in the water, we could see a shark from the house on the drone. So I ran down to the water and jumped in, and it was a big nurse shark just cruising for some food. And after taking the drone back up, we also spotted a hammerhead shark, a pod of dolphins chilling in the shallows, big schools of rays, and these mysterious fast-moving objects, which were either big fish or sharks. And we hoped this meant it would be a fishy day. And today we decided to head out a kilometre offshore to the islands, as the swell was lower, and we know from last time when we were here that it's where the bigger fish hang out. But as soon as we got the boat past the headlands into more open water, the weather got worse, and the water was looking eerie and dark, and no part of me wanted to hop in. So my mate got in first.
Alright, you're in the water first this time. I did it first last time.
Fucking murky as fuck.
Is it?
Yeah.
Fuck.
And the water was disgusting. And we were in about 20 metres of water, but could barely see 3 metres in front of us. So we moved closer to one of the islands, and I made a dive. And sadly, my GoPro was broken as I was diving past 10 metres, but I didn't realise, so I was just swimming around like an idiot trying to film stuff. But luckily we have my mate's perspective that barely captures what happens. I managed to get my first fish, a massive black drummer.
I'm so sorry, I turned my head because I saw something.
And I guess I could be lying as you didn't actually see the shot, and I could have just shot an already dead fish that we planted there earlier, but I was ecstatic to get a fish with the gun for dinner. And it was big as well, weighing in at 3.5 kilos. So after putting the fish in the boat, we jumped back in a slightly different spot, and the visibility got increasingly worse, and so did the current. But even with the worst conditions and being barely able to stay in one spot, my mate managed to shoot a leather jacket with the most unnecessary gangster grip I've ever seen. But while he was getting the fish on the float line, we were unknowingly being pushed by the current. And when we did finally look up, the boat was like 300 meters away.
Yeah, we're gonna head back that way.
And it's so hard to know how strong the currents are pulling you when the visibility is bad, as we don't have an underwater reference point. So I thought we were floating in one spot as I was watching a school of fish and keeping up with them. But it turns out those fish were also moving in the current.
It's a pretty crazy current.
Yeah.
We're not moving. I think let's just try to swim hard to it.
And we swam against the current for like 10 minutes, but it barely moved. And I don't know if you can tell from this footage, but this current was ripping. And just when I turned to Jilly and realised we were in a bit of trouble,
We're not moving.
We have a bit, we're behind that rock before.
our knight in shining armor arrived.
We didn't realize how strong this card is.
This beautiful bloke named Michael, who picked me up on his jet ski and took me back to the boat. And you know what? I'm very glad I didn't drown, as I'm pretty sure drowning and dying is against YouTube's monetization policy, and I really don't want this video to be demonetized. But my mate was still in the water. But luckily my mate was calm about the whole being swept out to sea thing, and decided to make the best of it and reload his gun and shoot some fish while waiting to be picked up. But unfortunately for him, before he could reload, this school of kingfish, probably around the 85 centimeter mark, came in and had a good look at him before disappearing into the gloom. And even though he didn't shoot one, it's really good to know they were in the area. Then Michael came just in time before he was swept in between the two islands and took him back to the boat. Michael, if you're watching, we love you. Alright, after that sketchy experience, we decided to call it a day and had some delicious black drummer ceviche for dinner.
Oh.
And I woke up determined to get some fish. Not just for the video, but just to eat, as we had been living off rations for the last 2 days. So we headed out on the boat to the calm spot from the first day and just decided to stay in the water until we got something good. And on my first dive, I dove to around 27 feet and spotted a nice sized sweet lips. And it didn't want to get close, and it also seemed to be hiding behind a big blue groper, which we aren't allowed to shoot. So I waited for the blue groper to move out of the way, and then missed. And that's it, I'm done. I'm missing even more with this gun than my normal one, and it's so frustrating to use. So now I'm just going to focus on catching dinner and having a nice time. So I grabbed my old gun.
I don't think he's coming back.
I stepped right on a sea urchin.
And because I broke my GoPro, I don't have my point of view of what happened next, but luckily my mate still recorded enough of it. I was breathing up on the surface in around 6 meters of water while my mate was untangling his gun. And in comes a 3 meter or 10-foot shark. And my mate does the right thing and stays calm and just watches it, but for some reason he doesn't tell me it's nearby and lets me dive to the bottom right next to it. Then when I get to the bottom, I only spot the shark when it's like 4 feet away from me at eye level. And I got the fright of my life and then did what you're not meant to do and freak out and immediately swam to the surface.
Yeah, I just saw it. It was heading right at you. Did you see what it was? I couldn't tell from above.
It looked like a white.
A white, you reckon, Buff?
And at the time, I thought it was a great white. It was in the murk and I could just see grey and then white on the bottom of the shark. But after seeing this footage, I think it's more likely a dusky whaler. Still a big shark though. So after seeing the shark, we did a couple more dives. And my mate took this sleeping morwong and some other fish. And then as we were swimming back to the boat, the third greatest thing that's ever happened to me in the water happened. We were both on the surface and I saw these little fish dart away, so I knew something big was coming in. And then in came 2 massive kingfish. And without even thinking, I took a top-down shot directly into the spine of the fish. And then my mate dove down to shoot the other one, but in his excitement, knocked his goggles half off, letting water into his eyes. Or at least that's the excuse he told me, and he missed. But my fish was on, and it seemed to be a good holding shot. And I knew this fish was big, but I didn't realize how big it was until I tried to pull it to the surface, and I couldn't. And I was very lucky that my shot must have nicked its spine.
I'll get it in for you.
As kingfish this size have more than enough power to pull all your gear down and tangle up on the bottom. But luckily I was managing to control the fish and stop it from doing that. But while I was doing this, I then began to think about the big shark we just saw and worried it was going to come in and eat the fish before I could. But there was nothing else I could do but wait until my mate had reloaded for a second shot. And if you've ever gone spearfishing, you'll know that there is no slower feeling in the world than trying to reload your gun while there's good fish around. And it took him a whole 1 minute 30 to do. Also, the other kingy he just missed was still swimming around taunting him. But eventually he reloaded and dove down for a second shot.
Do you want me to second shot or go for the other one?
Probably just second shot. I think we're good to do.
That's a monster!
And the whole idea of me making the double-barreled gun was to not have to need a second person or a second shot in situations like this. But you know what? I am very glad I didn't have the double-barreled spear gun on me, as I definitely would have missed this fish. And eventually the fish got tired enough and we managed to pull it up to me. And only now, when I tried getting my arms around the fish, did I realize how big it was. It was almost the length of my mate. And this doesn't feel real. I've never seen a fish this big before.
It's ridiculous. Fucking giant. My shot wasn't bad.
And this is definitely going to be enough fish for dinner. So we headed in. And on the way, we grabbed some abalone, or as I call them, vaginas of the sea.
So many abs. Fucking awesome.
And then weighed the kingfish. And it came in at 22 kilos and 136 centimeters, which is 4'4" or 50 pounds.
I forgot how big it was already after you just pulled it out again.
Kilo.
I'd like to say grace. There are big ships, there are small ships. There are ones that sail the sea. But the best ships are friendships, like the ones between you and me. And after the success of this double-barreled spear gun, I've decided I don't want it. And whoever finds it first gets it. Just please don't shoot yourself or anyone with it. The coordinates to its location are hidden somewhere in this video.